Kijk, ze vliegen weer al. Ah, hier op kop. Heel zacht, één kleur. Roze zeker? Doe weg.
Hier, bond ook al temoreren, hè? Daar, Schleck.
Dit is een snaphanger.
Nou, zo is er één op, hè? Er is er één, moet kijken, zeg.
Vuttingen.
Moet kijken, ik wil toch 2 stukken in ieder geval.
Hier, de Japaner. Hier, dat was kampioen. Hier is Zwitser.
In ieder geval verder hier.
Alexandr.
Hier, Schleck hier. Allee, Schleck. Dan die Schleck, daar ook.
Pezzotti. Hansmans.
Dekkers.
Kampioen van Ierland.
Hier, Koppertje. Pannenmeijer.
Pannenmeijer.
En daar krijgen we die Belg die rijdt in 3e positie, dat is Nico Simons. Er ook nog bij Wis, hier helemaal achteraan, Marcel Wis, dat is een Zwitser van Cervelo. Is er ook nog bij voor Bouygues Cyril Gauthier, er is dat kleine mannetje hier met die stevige beentjes. En Hubert Dupont, dus 2 Fransen, Dupont van AG2R, een Zwitser en een Belg. Nico Simons, weggereden na 58 kilometer met z'n drieën. Deze Dupont was er niet bij, die ging wat later, die schoot wat laat wakker en die moest kilometers achtervolgen om aan te sluiten. En dat deed hij dan uiteindelijk toch bij kilometer 94. Kijk naar hun voorsprong. 11 minuten. Simons eet 11 minuten. Maar Karel, het moet nog allemaal gebeuren.
Tuurlijk, het menu is kopieus straks en het begint over een goede 15 kilometer met de Côte de Wanne en de Côte de Stoumont. Dan gaan ze al een eerste keer in het peloton positie proberen te kiezen, zich ook gaan roeren, waardoor die voorsprong een klein beetje zal slinken. We hebben dan een overgangsfase met de Rosier en de Vecquée, alvorens naar La Redoute te snellen. De Côte de La Redoute, telkens een eikpunt in Luik-Bastenaken-Luik. Al is daar sinds vorig jaar misschien wel een klein beetje verandering in gekomen en is die Roche au Faucon, die voorlaatste helling waar je al over sprak, misschien wel belangrijker geworden. Door op die Roche de Faucon te demareren, daar kan je het verschil maken en dat kon vroeger moeilijker op de Sarre-Tillemont. Dus misschien dat het zwaartepunt een beetje naar achter verschoven is en dat La Redoute, de rol daarvan toch, dat die gedevalueerd is.
Kom eens. staat mensen grond op Wanne. Ja?
Marcel Wies.
Hey, kom aan, hè.
Kom mee. Ja, ze zijn er. Hou de band op top.
Oh, ze rijden hier op, zeg.
Hier, Frank Schleck hier. Hier, Frank.
Hey, Frankie. Frank. Waar rijden we hier? Zuursen hier. Groen.
Zit erin. Weg man. Pasto. Pasto.
Gilbert hier. Evans hier.
Evans.
Volgens die zeker. Valverde hier.
Valverde.
Pannenberg.
Kirienka.
Hier, Bazayev. Hey, kom aan, hè. Kuppetje of zeker, 137. Dag Lucas. Dag Lucas.
We were saying, we heard Thomas Dekker saying, and Samuel Sanchez, that it's the punchy riders that can really make it here. The ones who have an explosive turn of speed but can also climb well. This is the Côte de Ny. And these four men here have a gap, as you can see, of 10 minutes and 25 seconds with 91 kilometers to go in this edition of Liège-Bastogne-Liège over the peloton. They are, at the back you can see Nico Siemens of Cofidis. In the black on the left-hand side, 188 is Marcel Wies of the Cervelo Test team. Cyril Gauthier from Bbox Bouygues Telecom, who is going really well at Flèche-Wallonne, by the way, so he's in good shape, obviously. And Herbert Dupont, the climber from Étoile Mondiale, he's now on the front of this little quartet of riders out. Good riding by Gauthier. Gauthier's been trumpeted as a potential top rider for a long time. We saw him last race. Is this for a rider?
Well, something the same as we've had in the past 2 days, Amstel Gold, Flèche-Wallonne. As we heard some of the riders talking, you have to be a very punchy rider, a rider that can get up these short climbs. And today, you know, they're not as short as they were last week. I think the Amstel, you have, you know, these 2-3 kilometer climbs max, but here you go up to maybe 4 or 5 kilometers. So it's certainly a little bit more difficult. And
welcome back. Well, there it is. You can see it on the right-hand side, the peloton. It's Lamprey doing a lot of the work for Damiano, Cunego. Enrico Gasparoni's been doing really well in the last week.
Zijn er?
Ja, zijn er.
Hier. Ja, dat is Gauthier.
Ja.
Hey, bravo! Ecco.
Then maybe not have a successful Giro, you can still, you know, survive on that win here today. So you know, it gives you a little bit of assurance. It gives you a little bit, you know, you can rest a bit, you can relax a bit more. It takes the pressure off yourself and takes the pressure off the team. And you know, there's a lot more at the end of the year. So certainly, if you're in shape, and as I said, a lot of the riders here, the big favourites, the ones that are capable of winning.
Job today, clearly. Well, let's just have a look at the Barlow World team. John Lee Augustin. And for those of you who remember, he was the man who catapulted himself off the top of the highest mountain on the Tour de France. last year in a desperate attempt to cling on to the front guys, and then overshot a corner and went down the scree slope, unfortunately. Francisco Bellotti, Patrick Calcani, Gianpaolo Chuela, Marco Corti, who I think is related to Claudio Corti, actually, Steve Cummings, Christopher Froome, and Paolo Longo Borghini, who, if you remember, was in that four-man break to Nantes when Samuel Dumoulin won last year. Interesting that Barloworld should be riding on the front, Sean. What do you reckon? They think that some of their all-rounders, come climbers, could perhaps be up there today?
Yes, well, I can see there are a number of the Barloworld riders. It's Cummins out there on the front line, but then, you know, you go back to about 15th position. You can
just all concertining together, and it was almost inevitable, wasn't it, that somebody was just going to slip off a little bit of a bump. That's Dirk Velimakis. Oh, there's somebody on the side of the road from Euskaltel there, so more than a little bit of a bump, but so often happens when the pace goes up and down and just yo-yos backwards and forwards. I didn't see who the Euskaltel rider on the side of the road was, but you can see Velimakis going over to the right-hand side there and just toppling off the bike, along with one of the guys from Barloworld. Is it Chuela? We'll just have to have a quick look. It's Oroth, the rider on the ground from Euskaltel. It is Chuela from Barloworld who just touched wheels there, and hopefully Oroth is okay. Well, settling back into the pace, as you said, Sean. Pretty good weather for it today. It's a little bit grey. It's not completely sunny all the time, but that's good conditions for riding.
Yes, well, you know, perfect conditions. Not too warm, not too much sunshine, because it is a very, you know, it's a draining race here. If you have really warm conditions, well, then it makes it more difficult. Again, already it's a very difficult one. But the dry conditions and the conditions we've got today, just perfect conditions. It makes it so safe as well. Although this one is not as dangerous as some of the cobbled classics, where if you have the wet conditions, it's much more dangerous. But still, it makes the race much easier. And if you have rain and you know, bad weather here, it can get quite cold up in this area, so certainly it's, you know, the best conditions I think they could ask for.
Longish climbers, Kim Kirken is just having to sit in and pedal at his own pace. The former Luxembourg champion, coming back from injury, of course, broken clavicle. It just goes to show that it takes a long time. Other riders suffering off the back there. That's František. No, I thought it was, sorry, I thought it was Rabon for a minute, but going through our shot, but Francisco Rey.
Ja, nou zijn ze. Veilig, ja. Ja. Oeh, ze vliegen, dat is op, ze vliegen.
it's good for morale, but it doesn't give any guarantees, of course, that you're going to do well in the Giro, because again, if you look at the riders here, Cunego, for example, you know, last year he won classics, but in the big tours he just wasn't up to it.
This morning, Dupont, Gauthier, Wyss and Siemens. 6 minutes and 48 seconds they've got at the moment. Yeah, this is the same area as they use, or same as the Spa-Francorchamps circuit. And the weather can be exceptionally temperamental here. It doesn't really matter what time of year it is, but especially in these rainy months of March and April, you can have pouring, driving rain, and then 3 or 4 kilometers away it can be bright sunshine. And it'll change.
Nice to see. It's not often we get a big one of the big classics where we get three paddies on the start, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely, and a chicken at the side.
You know, allowed out that night again, but he certainly, you know, he's bike handling, and you know, when you talk to the riders and a lot of the professional riders, his bike handling is a little bit poor. He, you know, seems to get tangled up in these crashes quite often, and certainly it's not good for the confidence when it goes on. And that's a little thing that, you know, as you go on your career, you know, the riders know that weakness is there, and if you're leading a race like a stage race, for example, in a big tour like the Tour of France, any moment they will get, if there's a downhill close to the finish, they're going to test you in that. And
kilometres as well, and we'll have his opinions on how Philippe perhaps could do in this race today. Those who've been following the saga of Alex Taylor's broken legs, yes, he's back on a bike now for Alex Taylor from Holmes Chapel, riding in saying, I actually managed 35 minutes today. It's the first time I've been on a bike in 6 weeks. I was wondering if I'd ever ride again. Then in a hospital bed. Well done, Alex, and you got some good weather for it as well. Serguei Ivanov in the middle of your shot. Ivanov, winner of Amstel Gold, riding with the strength of 2 men. He really did grind that big gear out ahead of Carsten Kroon, and there was never any doubt as soon as he put turn Amstel Gold, sure, they'll be wanting to do something today. They missed out both times. They got a second place in 2 separate Ardennes Classics. Ivanov pipping Kroon to the front of the sprint to the line at Amstel Gold, and also Andy Schleck being beaten to the line by Davide Rebellin. So I mean, they've had a good showing, but they'd like to end it up with a win.
Well, certainly, you know, when you get so close, as they say, and so far, the win is so important, and, you know, to get second or third on the podium, it's always a little disappointing. If you're a big favourite, if you're an outsider and you get on the podium, well, then you're really happy with that performance, because you're never really expecting it. But when you're a big favourite and you hope to get the win all the time, and you finish second, you know, on the moment is a little bit of a disappointer. And certainly for Saxo, with the team they have got, the riders they have got, you know, 2 seconds in, you know, in 2 big classics, they'd love to have a win, and today they're certainly going to try and make it difficult here, and that's, you know, what they're doing. They're just going to drive it on here and eliminate as much drivers as possible, because there is times between climbs here where it levels off a bit, and you might have 10 12 kilometres, and if you have a lot of riders in the bunch, if you still have a bunch of 60-70 riders, there are going to be a lot of attacks, and that is difficult to control. So what they want to do is just make it majorly difficult and try and, you know, just grind down this bunch to the smallest number of riders possible.
So big names just lurking in our shot there, not absolutely on the front, but we saw Rebellin. Next to him was John-Lee Augustin.
You had some enforced rest from illness, and you're just coming back through training, and then to come straight into something like Amstel and Flèche and Liège, and, you know, 3 big races in 1 week is quite a tough task. So, you know, certainly I don't think you can judge the fact that Dan's at the back here at the moment for the future, because I think, you know, in the future he's definitely got the ability to do well in races like this.
Your team had a tremendous start to the season. 3 minutes and 5 seconds is the gap for our 4 breakaway men. It's tumbling down ever downwards for these guys with 60 kilometres to go, and then we'll probably see some some real fireworks start. All the big teams have to come to the front and keep controlling it, because I'm sure that as eggs is eggs, somebody's going to try and have another go after these four get reeled back in about what, 20 kilometres, I would imagine. But had a terrific start to the season, the Cervelo test team. Was that the entire, do you think, Dave, what is it about that particular hill?
Well, I suppose first of all you have 226 kilometres when you get to that in or about, and you know, there's a lot of racing being done, and to get onto Redoute, there's, you know, it's like the end of a race. It's like a preparation for a sprint. They just go so hard, and they just, you know, really sprint into the bottom of it, and everybody's, you know, pretty close to being on the limit, and if you're a little bit under, a little bit not on your best, well, then you're going to, you know, suffer that bit more. And the climb then itself, you know, it drags on up by the motorway there. It's not too steep, but, you know, you're always going at a very, very fast rate, because riders want to move up all the time and getting positions, even when you're on the climb, because the last kilometre gets very, very steep, and as you said, it kicks up that very severe percentage. And it's a place, I think, if you look back at the records, it's, you know, the breaks and the decisive moves have went there, I'd say, more than any time on any of the final climbs.
Just take us through the profile of the climb itself. It's fairly steep at the bottom, and there's a bit of a false flat. It just evens out a little and then kicks up at the end. Where is the crucial point to launch that attack?
Well, I think at the top you have to be, you know, when it really gets steep, everybody's on the limit to get over that steep section where it kicks up to you know, around the 8%, and the last 500 or 600 metres are really, really testing, and then at the top as well, it's a little bit falls flat. It doesn't go down immediately, and that can be a killer as well, because when you're really going at 100%, giving it, you know, full bore, you know, it hurts big time. And if you're feeling good, well, then you can dish out the torture, but if you're suffering a bit, well, then you're going to receive it. And you know, it all depends on that, what way you feel on the climb. And sometimes, you know, you can be suffering maybe 50 kilometres ago, you don't feel so well, you eat a bit, you drink a bit, you say to yourself, you know, everybody else is suffering the same way, and, you know, you just try and hold the morale, hold your head, and the most important thing, as I said, just to keep on eating, keep on drinking a bit. And sometimes you can come around, and I certainly, you know, had that situation where 60 kilometres ago, I thought I was in trouble in the race, but, you know, ride around and just got better in the end. And that's the way in a 6 hour, 6.5 hour race. Sometimes, you know, you can go through a bad patch 50% through the race and just recover and, you know, finish very strongly.
You won this race twice in '84 and '89. Which of those two wins sticks in your memory more? Which one was the better win for you, do you think? Because you can see it's perfectly possible to have a better win, isn't it?
Yes, well, I think '89 was a very good win. I got away in a break. I was with the PDM team at the time, and there were a lot of big hitters in that team, Rooks, Tunison, so I was a little bit afraid of my teammates as well in the final, because, you know, it's not always the other teams and the other riders who we have as you know, as contenders for the win. Sometimes the teammates as well can be in a big team, and I decided to get out of the bunch early, because I knew that they were going to go in the attack, you know, in the final climb. So I got away with Delgado, Anderson, and a French rider, and there was four of us, and we just held on there with a minute and a half, and we were dangling out there, and you know, held on to the finish, and I won the sprint. But at that time it was finishing down in Liège, because the finishing ons, that's something new, and that certainly made it more difficult, because the finish into Liège was a bit of a downhill. It was a flat finish, where here this hill up to ons and the Côte de Saint-Nicolas, that is a very
Jacobs, hè?
Jacobs, ja, ik herinner mij van op de voorstelling van Sudan Slotto dat hij door een van de ploegleiders toch werd voorgedragen als
ja, daar zijn
de verrassing van het seizoen. Vooralsnog ploegmaat van Alcantara. Ook al achteraan, dus het lijkt mij dat dat
Hey, come on, eh? Here we go.
Real steep climbs in the end. If it had been in Liège, they might have, you know, pulled it off, where with the finish here in ons, it made it that little more difficult, and that's just not give them an opportunity to, you know, to win in a sprint.
Well, these are our four men still out there at the moment. Gauthier, Vuis, Dupont and Nico Siemens. They've got 1 minute and 43 seconds. You can see the sort of nature of the countryside. There's a forestry plantation obviously here, but it's all up and down, up and down, and it's not an easy area to race in, Sean. There's some very well-known and very well-respected short stage races here for people slightly down the pecking order.
Yes, certainly it's not an easy place at all, and there's actually the Sean Kelly Classic, which is in the Ardennes. It starts in VSL and it goes a lot of this route, and I went over there 2 years ago and I got a hard time. It was a very warm day and I did 140 kilometers, but you know, we went up Laradouche, we went up about riders in Torino Adriatico. He was, you know, going very poorly, but he certainly he's pulled it about, and I think, you know, the form is coming right, and you know, when you feel that every race you feel a bit better, well then the morale just, you know, it oozes up, and that is amazing. You say to yourself, well, I'm coming in form now, and you know, it's a good moment. And of course for Gasparotto as well, you know, the races that are coming up, the Tour of Italy for example, another race which is so important for a rider, an Italian rider, you know, the morale is good and the form is coming, and that's, you know, it's just up. Jacobs. Kom maar, hè.
Earlier, another mountain biker, Daniel, by the way, who we were talking to earlier, is an ex-mountain biker. It's they're a sort of select breed, really, the mountain bikers who come across to road riding and have managed to fit in. There were certainly some people like Miguel Martinez, I'm sure Dan will remember him from his racing days, who just could never ever fit in at all. He just didn't know what to do when it came to team structure. Both at Mapai and at Phonak. He'd sort of leap off up the road in the most bizarre single-handed attacks at the most bizarre places. But some of the mountain bikers have come across codes, and as it used to be with cyclocross riders who've come across codes as well. So things are really stretching out here. So Fuglsang, one of the big talents of the CSC team, and I think he's the national mountain bike champion actually, and the national road was time trial champion anyway, but he's certainly the national mountain bike champion. Well, look at this, Sean. It's beginning to get a little hectic up here.
Yes, it's certainly the action is on at the moment, and of course we see Chris Sorensen going in the attack. They're going out alone, and you know, a lot of the teams and the riders are getting worried here because they were happy for quite a long time. The Saxo Bank team were just, you know, prepared to tow it along, and you know, a perfect situation. They were controlling the race, and you know, the other teams and the other big favourites just allow them to do it. And if you take up the race and you show your hand, well then you're going to, you know, have to do a lot of work, which the Saxo Bank have done a lot. But when they see a rider like, you know, Sorensen, you know, going in the attack, they say, oh, careful here now, you know, Saxo not going to control this anymore. And you know, the other teams do not want to have the weight of that on their shoulders at this moment, because still 50 kilometers to go. So, you know, a lot of hopping around here and a lot of attacks, as you can see.
Yeah, certainly is, one after another, people going off the front. It's Chris Sorensen, who is up the road. Nicky Sorensen. They're no relation, by the way, but they are in the same team. Sorensen, pretty common Danish name. Thanks to Fons Myers, who's writing to us from Thailand, would you believe? Just to show that we're broadcasting all over the world.
En nou heen van Servero. Ik denk dat Florencio was Servero. En top voor Vlaanderen. Hebben ze van de televisie, hebben ze nog los.
Divanines has been pretty active this week. He's looking very, very strong. Chris Sorensen is with him. Frost Saxo back. It means some other riders have to chase. It means Case Depagnes have to chase. It means that Lampre has to do the work. It means that Euskaltel have to do work as well. Linus Gerdeman, yeah. Well, Gerdeman's made that recovery from the dreadful leg break that he had last year and come back in. He went to elected to go to Milram. He's often had a reputation for being a little bit difficult to work with, but I think he's just a strong character, Sean.
Yes, well, he certainly came back. I get to that with 30-40 seconds advantage over the bunch. You can get up the climb, and then the big hitters, the big guys can really come up the climb very fast. Where if you stay in the bunch, you're not going to be able to match that explosive stuff from the really strong riders. So that's important. And for Saxo Bank, for example, they could have a rider out in front, and if Schleck, or maybe the two Schleck brothers, and if they can come across in a smaller group, you have another man up the road, which is a great advantage. Where in the situation, if they stayed in the bunch, well then they, the possibility to have that rider Sorensen up there would not be possible.
A touch under.
I can imagine 250 kilometers in that conditions, and just 13 riders made it to the finish. And I climbed off, I think, only about 15 or 20 kilometers. I had some people that I knew on the side of the road, and when I see them, there was no way I was continuing. And he will certainly know the road better than anybody else here. But if you haven't got the legs, that's not. It's not going to help. It's not everything.
Well, he tried last year when he was still in Francis de Jure colours and up towards the front. It didn't help him much then. Now we're beginning to see some action a little bit behind. Just on this slope we can see Skill Shimano. I wonder if that's Yver. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's Jonathan Yver from Skill Shimano at the front of the main peloton. These are the three that tried to get away. But Cyril Gauthier, this is a very, very good ride by this young Frenchman. There's a lot of talent in this man's legs.
Yes, there certainly is, because to do it at this moment of the race for a young rider who's only came into the professional ranks, and after that 225 kilometers in the legs, being able to ride up here and ride on ahead of his breakaway companions, it's a good pointer, and I think we will see more of him. And he's that style of rider. This terrain certainly suits him, and he's doing a nice job, doing a great job today.
Divanines dropping back. Still Sorensen pushing on. Divanines looks over his shoulder. The peloton is easing up on them at the moment. Still nobody launching a major jump on this Côte de la Redoute. At the top there'll be 34.5 kilometers to go to the finish. It's just over 2 kilometers in length, this particular hill. 8.4 is the average gradient. And some riders are always beginning to suffer at this sort of length. 220 kilometers they've got in their legs here. And now the peloton is beginning to come up behind them. It's led by Skill Shimano. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that is Jonathan Yver riding today. He's had a really good Paris-Nice. And now beginning to grind it up these hills. Dupont is about to be joined by the front end of the peloton here. Now Dupont is a pretty good climber himself. Looking over his shoulder, his teammate Sylvain Calzati, a stage winner in the Tour de France, dropping backwards. Is that Kolobnev? One of the Saxo riders once again launching off the front, and it is Kolobnev, Alexandr Kolobnev. They're playing the 1-2. They've had Sorensen up the road. Now they'll send another man up the road, which means that the big teams, the other big teams, have to really start to work, because they've got such a strong team. If you look at them on paper, Frank Schleck, Andy Schleck, Gustav Erik Larsson, another rider coming off the front here, Sean. Looks like Garmin rider, is it?
Dico Giovanni?
Yeah, it could be Dico Giovanni. It's very difficult to tell from this high up on the camera. They've got the two Schlecks. Jakob Fuglsang, we've seen, has been doing a lot of work. Kolobnev, who was in your shot just then. Carsten Kroon, second last weekend. Gustav Erik Larsson, a medalist in the Olympics. Andy Schleck, second in the Giro d'Italia. Chris Sorensen, we've seen. Nicky Sorensen, the Danish national champion. This man, winner of the Eroica. That's a pretty impressive team, Sean.
Yes, it certainly is, and you know, they've changed the tactics a bit. They were riding on the front, as we see, for a long time, but now they're just firing men off. And Kolobnev, you know, when he gets out in front, he's, you know, a powerful rider. He can just, you know, time trial out front there, and at this sort of terrain, you know, he can just power up the hills as well. So if there's a little bit of a moment where hesitation for the other teams and the big favourites to look at each other, he could put out that, you know, that 20-30 seconds advantage very quickly. And if we could just go back,
you can see it's still going. That's his Serpa. It's Jose. You can see Jose Serpa there. And we saw how good Serpa was the other day. We were discussing him just beforehand. Jose Serpa, who made his big-time debut for Dico Giovanni, as it is now, in the Tour of Langkawi about 4 years ago, where he won back-to-back stages, one on the flat and one up Genting Highlands. So he can certainly go, this boy. I'm a big fan, actually. He's got a big engine.
A lot of the big favourites still there, and quite a lot of riders in the bunch. And as I said, the good weather conditions, it helps a lot, because the riders seem to be able to hang in more there. But if we get an overhead shot here, you know, they might be only 20-25 riders. So it's certainly done damage, because coming into the dudes, there was probably maybe 50 riders in the group. And as I said, it's so important that you have to stay up front, watch the other big favourites, and you know, depending on what style of rider you are, do you need to go in the attack, or do you play the waiting game and just watch the other favourites? But I think, you know, when we'll come back to see an overhead shot of our main bunch, there'll be a lot of riders have lost contact here, and you know, the main part of the bunch could be down maybe to 20-25 riders. But depending on what happened afterwards as well, if they do not continue riding after the reduced climb, well, then they could, a lot of riders, you know, make their way back into the bunch again. So it depends on all those little details what happened from here on.
That's Dupont is still hanging in this group. Carsten Kroon is the other man who's joined for Saxo Bank. Kolobnev and Kroon both in here. Jose Serpa from Dico Giovanni. Then it's Roman Koisinger. And the Euskaltel rider is Igor Martinez, who has also been going well midweek. "33 kilometers to go, and they'll have to go very hard. One of the big favourites. It'll be now down to Kees de Pagna, mainly for Alejandro Valverde, to try and pull this one back together. Are they waiting too long, Sean?
Well, are they waiting, or are they not able, is the question, because you know, the riders that you have got from Kees de Pagna, it's possible that, you know, they're pretty cooked, and the rider we see there on the front maybe just not, you know, good enough to close it down. It looked like that the Lamprey rider was doing very well, but this will certainly, you know, cause a lot of panic for the big favourites, because now Gilbert going through here, you know, still 28 kilometers to go. It's you know, as a big favourite, it's a big risk to take, because if you go out here and commit yourself, well, you pay the price dearly. But you know, if there's a lot of
Seppa looking back to see that this man has gone out by himself. Well, that's his intentions.
Well, we've seen in the classics in the last, you know, in the Tour of Flanders, it was the Steel and Slaughter team did a lot of chasing in the end. Also in the Amstel Gold Race, they were really chasing in that final and got very close to about 3 breakaways, but just wasn't good enough with Van Sommerden to close it down in the end. And the 3 leaders held on with about, you know, going into the last number of kilometres by 10-12 seconds. So Gilbert is, you know, the tactic is different here. But again, who has he got in the bunch? Has he got anybody there to look after him? And he's certainly, you know, taking the race and taking the risk here and going out in front up there. Lamprey have somebody up there, Saxo Bank have somebody up there, Iskatel have somebody up there. But now when it comes back together, I think there will be more teams prepared to put a man on the front maybe and start, you know, pulling this bunch along. And that's going to be a difficult one for Gilbert out front on your own with still 27 kilometres, 23 seconds advantage. It's a big ask, but you know, I've often seen that before. You'd say to yourself, well, you know, it's a little bit of a mistake tactic wise, but it can work out. You can never forecast what's going to happen in this bunch here and how the big favourites will, you know, how it will work and how they will plan their tactics.
And of course, if you have a breakaway of 4 or 5 teams, and there are some missing, there's a lot of action to get people across to them, and the breakaway still keeps going because it has an advantage that those teams who have got somebody in it want to push it along. Gilbert beginning to suffer behind Leonardo Duque. Duque is the Cofidis rider. That's a diminutive stature on the left-hand side of your shot. And Saxo Bank taking it up again, looking over the shoulder. But the opposite is true, of course, Sean. Once every team starts to get a man into that break, the sort of fire goes out of it, really. Its purpose has been nullified, really.
Well, yeah.
Jose Serpa on the deck, what did he do? Oh, whoa! Oh, my word! Well, how strange. That was essentially a high side. That's exactly what happens. And Martinez and Andy Schleck. This is Andy Schleck on the attack as they come to the Côte de la Roche-au-Fourchamp. We were saying, could this not be somewhere that an attack would be likely to come? The Redoutes has historically been the place where the attacks do come, but this is not the way now. Kolobnev's got him, go with him. Kolobnev will see him. Will he go with him? No, he can't. He's just going to sit there. Andy Schleck, one of the guys who really could put the cat amongst the pigeons. This must be having alarm bells going back in the peloton, Sean, because this guy's just finished second in Flèche Wallonne.
Yes, certainly, and surprising that we not see a reaction from the other big favourites, the Valverde's, Cunego, for example, because, as you said, Schleck is, you know, one of the big favourites here, and it could be, you know, a sign that they're suffering a bit. Valverde we haven't seen a lot. Maybe Cunego is not on his best, because if he was, I think, you know, you should be marking a guy like Andy Schleck when he goes at this moment, and at this time, just inside 20 kilometres to go, it's a vital time to leave a big favourite go, and you know, there's not a lot of teams here with riders who can chase later. That is the thing, you have always to be careful. If you haven't got maybe 2 or 3 teammates who can take up the chase, then you have to be really careful not to allow the other big favourites get an advantage and just go out there and, you know, pull out 15-20 seconds, because it's so difficult to close them down in that final 20k.
Well, clearly he got himself in the right position, just hit himself until the vital moment and just went around the outside. Clever. Managed to sort of, then he'll get himself mixed up in the breakaway group. A little bit difficult if 2 or 3 of the favourites are not keeping their eye on the ball, and they certainly haven't been. And Schleck is
looking around.
Yeah, looking around to see where everybody else is. But I wonder how far back he is on Gilbert now. What, 28 seconds? Is that Group 2? Is that him? Or is that the group we're talking about? Certainly Gilbert was looking around himself, behind him as well. Will he be happy if Andy Schleck comes up to him?
Well, I think, yes, he would be happy, and it's a good situation to be in with Schleck out front here, because the Saxo team are not going to start riding on the front. You know, if Schleck just sat back in the bunch there, we could see a number of the Saxo riders, and they're the team maybe who have the most riders. And I would, you know, stick my neck out and say, it's definitely the situation. We see Kolobnev, you know, very strong out front. We see Krohn there, and they're still going to be, you know, in this bunch. So for Gilbert, that is a good thing to have Schleck chasing on his own. What do you do in a situation? Do you knock it back a bit, or do you keep on going? I think, you know, Gilbert is just going to keep on time trialing, keep on giving it 100% here, but, you know, Schleck is certainly pulling away. And when he went in the attack, he was looking about. It didn't look like he was giving it 100%. He was looking around, you know, as somebody coming with me, what's happening here, guys? But he's certainly, you know, just pulling out the advantage, you know, gradually here, and it looks like back in the bunch, you know, there's a little bit. I think some of the big favourites are starting to, you know, suffer, because otherwise there would be a major reaction when Schleck Schleck went away. Gilbert, first of all, of course, a danger man, but when Schleck moves, if I was in Cunego's position, Valverde's position, I would be reacting very, very quickly.
Well, it looks like we've got some reaction coming out of the front of the peloton now. That Adequa Giovanni rider at the front. You can see Case Depagny in there as well. Andy Schleck, one of the really big favourites, is away ahead of the peloton. He's got Philippe Gilbert ahead of him as well. Right at the back, that looks like Gauthier, actually. Oh no, it's Pierre Rollin, sorry, too big for Gauthier. Just look at the way everybody's beginning to suffer now. Davide Rebellin, we know, would have started this as a favourite, having won Flèche Wallonne in the middle of the week, but according to Race Radio, he's suffering. Gilbert doing a great ride here, but Andy Schleck looks like he may be shutting him down a little bit. And if they get together, well, how would you see those two coming to the line, Sean?
Well, of course, if they get together, I think Gilbert is certainly the better one in the sprint. You know, you look at Gilbert's performance in the last couple of weeks. He's won some very good sprints in the big classics, and also in the Flèche Brabançonne he won in a sprint of a group behind. So he is, you know, a small group. He's quite a good sprinter, and it's definitely he would have the beating of Schleck in this finish. And you know, if Schleck can join up with him, it certainly, you know, would help a lot, because still 19 kilometres, and you know, as we see 17 seconds back to the, you know, the third group on the road, as we see Schleck, you know, joining up with Gilbert at the moment.
So there we are, one becomes two. Andy Schleck and Philippe Gilbert. Gilbert will just sit on the wheel of Andy Schleck for just a little bit. Schleck has decided to go straight past, take up his own pace. He's got his own agenda here, forcing the other big favourites to do something behind. Now, this looks like a reaction by Case Depagny. There's two men here. The second man in this line, it looks to me as though he's, the second Case Depagny rider, looks like he's Alejandro Valverde. It's Scarponi, is it? And then Rodriguez, Gasparotto. Just looking in this group to see there's Evans is in this group, Ivanov is in this group, Kolobnev is back in this group. This is looking more, there's Valverde with the yellow bike and yellow helmet, the black Case Depagny outfit. Serguei Ivanov hits the front and decides to go off by himself. Winner of Amstel Gold a week ago, and still favourites are looking at each other. I'm not sure, are they suffering, Sean, or are they just looking at each other?
Yes, I think there's a lot of the favourites suffering. Cunego, as I said, Valverde, you know, you have to start reacting now, because you know, he's into that stage where 18 kilometres to finish. And when you look at Ivanov and
look at this, yeah, Gilbert.
Is Gilbert cracking here, which is a surprise. You know, he looked quite impressive out there in front, and you know, just Schleck is riding away from him. It's not looking good, because you know, this is a moment where they really have, they're in a super position, two out front with the advantage they've got. If they could just, you know, work well together here, but it looks like Gilbert is cracking a bit.
Well, his brother, Frank Schleck, has been third twice in this race, but Andy Schleck, who we saw on the Côte de Saint-Nicolas a couple of years ago, they were trying to work over Alejandro Valverde, the Schleck brothers, and completely messed it up. When they should have attacked one after another, they didn't, and Valverde was quite happy to get a race on, because it's just not panned out the way it usually does.
No, certainly not. Well, there's certainly the big favourites going out in the attack, and Gilbert was the one where we were, you know, I was surprised to see him going in the attack that early. And you know, again, I think, you know, within the Lancelot team could be nervous. Things not, you know, the results this year not going well. Gilbert hasn't had a good start to the season, and sometimes, you know, you can, you know, get a bit over nervous and maybe make mistakes tactically in that way. But he's seeing, and that is going to be vital for Schleck. Who, you know, who's going to take it up here? Is there a number of teams who will take it up, or you know, if there's only one team maybe, but we can see against, you know, the Case Depagny riders, you know, rolling on the front here. This is going to be a very difficult section for Schleck to hold on to that advantage of 38 seconds which he's got at the moment.
Joaquin Rodriguez trying to urge people to come through and do some work. Now here's the composition: Valverde, Rodriguez, Rebellin, Scarponi, Frank Schleck in this group. I haven't seen the jersey yet, but they tell us he's in there. Kolobnev still here, Kruan, Gesink, Cadel Evans, Gilbert in this group, having gone out by himself. Vaugrenard, Nibali, Kreuziger, Van den Dert, Serguei Ivanov, we've already seen, refusing to do all the work on the front. Nocentini, Cunego, Sanchez, Sastra, Gerrans. So Daniel's team getting their 2 big men for this race in this group. Gerrans, the #1 rider for this race, but that's on Liège. Well, it'll be a long time since a Luxembourger won Liège-Bastogne-Liège, if at all. I'm just trying to look through the records actually to see who, if I can pick out a name immediately, who was a Luxembourger. But they've been trying very hard. Frank Schleck has had 2 third places and still driving away on the front now. It's Cervelo. They're going to try and shut this gap down, but this is like this is do or die now, Sean, because the gap, I think, is just too big.
Well, I think yes, the rider who is on the front at the moment, just give it everything to the beginning of the climb. And if you have got a teammate who is still feeling good, go in the attack here, try and get out of this group. And but to get across to Schleck, it's going to be, I think, impossible at the moment with this gap of a minute and a half at the moment. It's just too great to do anything about it.
A minute and a half of this gap there. This is the Côte de Saint-Nicolas now, as David Duffield once pointed out to me, and you can see it yourself. You want to see the gradient of a climb, look at the side of the road, look at the doorsteps, and you'll see from one end to the other, it's about, 20 centimetres one side and about 5 the other side. Gasparotto out of the saddle. Kolobnev looking behind him to see what sort of reaction is going to come. Well, Gasparotto, one of the dark horses here, because he's been in very, very good form. Not quite getting away, burying himself at the moment to try. But this man